Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Lincoln Riley, USC, going on the road to play Minnesota. Kind of looking at where these two teams are. USC with a massive second half performance against Wisconsin. Now, Dill, that's back-to-back weeks of second half performances that have been really impressive. The USC fans who've been rocking with the boys kind of know my take on it. The culture feels different. Like, this is a USC team where we've seen have their backs up against the wall back-to-back weeks and just absolutely battle back. So if you're a USC fan, I think that is by far what you're most excited about in terms of what this USC team has showed throughout the first four games. Then you look at Minnesota. Dill, kind of a weird team to get a read on. Played a very good fourth quarter against Michigan, got themselves back into that football game, but it's been a roller coaster of a ride. And I think most concerningly for this Minnesota offense, I feel like they've lost a little bit of their identity in culture on offense. You take a look at this Minnesota team, when we're used to talking about PJ Fleck in Minnesota, it is 12-13 personnel, running the football 65% of the time. You take a look at the numbers, only running the football 44% of the time. That's 108th in the country. Only running the football for 3.5 yards per carry. That's 101st. They've been having to lean on Max Brosmer probably a little bit more than they would like to early in this season. I think one of the biggest storylines is, can Minnesota get the ground game going against the USC defense that, outside of 3 plays against Michigan, I think has been very impressive stopping the run. That's the storyline, I think, heading into this one. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And these preview and prediction episodes, they're probably our favorite episodes to do, though. And the amount of support that y'all continue to show, it's been absolutely amazing. Just hit 42,000 subscribers. That can't do without you guys. So appreciate y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, let it fly in the comments section. There's a reason this spread inside of 10 points, USC road favorites. Dill, let's get into this matchup. Let's start with this Minnesota offense versus this USC defense. If we were to preview this game 12 months ago, the biggest concern for me would be if Minnesota just runs the football, controls the time possession, and just kind of salts this game away. If you're a USC fan heading into this matchup, I feel like you feel pretty confident with what USC has shown against the run throughout the first couple of games. My biggest question mark is, can Minnesota get back to that ground attack that they just haven't seemed to have found early in 2024?
And frankly, I'd be willing to excuse those numbers if they didn't really struggle against UNC. Because obviously, Iowa and Michigan, I don't think a lot of teams are running the ball against them particularly well. Iowa's certainly one of the better rushing defenses as well. So, you can excuse maybe not running the ball great in those games, but you got to be able to put it on the deck and hammer it on UNC, a team that just gave up a zillion points to James Madison. So, again, that's where I think you get a little concerned, is there that ability to, let's say, wake the run game up? The disappointing part is, the running backs are pretty good. I mean, Darius Taylor's very good. I think Major's playing pretty good as well as kind of that second. Their offensive line, they just got to be able to move guys more consistently and avoid having big negative plays, because that's what killed them against UNC.
Just doesn't feel like they have that physically imposing offensive line that we're used to talking about when you play with Minnesota. And although USC might give up some size, we've talked about this on the defensive line. They're rocking with 2 interior defensive linemen that are sub 300 pounds, and Nate Clifton and Gavin Mayer. Dude, these guys play their tails off. They do the dirty work, right? And we had a question mark about what this USC defense looks like, specifically in the second half when you have to get to some depth with Bear Alexander, redshirt, and hitting the portal. Our questions were abundantly answered in the second half against Wisconsin. And I think you're getting a lot of second-level defenders playing at a high level. Now, Eric Gentry's health in this football game will certainly be something to monitor heading into this one. But you talk about Kamari Ramsey, you talk about Jalen Smith, some guys firing downhill and making plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. Dill, USC's defense against the run, again, outside of 3 plays against Michigan, has been pretty damn solid. The haters are going to be pissed. USC's defense only giving up 17 points per game. That's 20th in the country. Now, I think
one thing I think Minnesota probably has to do at the end of the day is they don't need to run the ball great, but I think you saw Wisconsin be able to, at least for the first half of that football game, stay on schedule a little bit. Like, they weren't popping big runs on USC, but they were doing an okay job. I think for a second I was like, oh, that's a little reminiscent of last year, where pile was moving forward, guys were falling forward, they weren't getting stuck when USC was tackling them. And obviously they closed that gap really quickly in the second half and really started to sit on Wisconsin. But if Minnesota can kind of at least run the ball and keep themselves in schedule, I think that sets up okay for how Brosmer is going to want to pass it, because he's not a guy who's going to throw the ball down the field really at all. But when he's on schedule, when that Minnesota team stays on schedule, he's shown a pretty good ability to get the ball out of his hands very quickly, diagnose what the defense is doing, and find holes in the zones and get in.
Max Brosmer's average up to target is extremely low. Only 9.6% of his passes have gone 20 plus yards down the field. Like, they aren't asking this guy to be a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback, but he has been kind of doing what they need. And you're absolutely right. Like, if Minnesota is behind the chains, behind schedule, and you're starting to ask Max Brosmer to sit in the pocket and push the ball down the field, that's not where Minnesota wants to be as an offense. And I think that's largely where their struggles have been, just not staying on schedule. There are two things that concern me about Minnesota passing the football. One, you got a difference maker in Daniel Jackson. I think that he's come up with some catches that have been some of the more incredible catches that I've seen watching college football. He is almost doubling up the next pass catcher in terms of targets. It's no secret where Minnesota wants to go with the football when they're throwing it, but I feel like they're a little bit one-dimensional with him. And I think more importantly, if they are behind the chains, like, pass protection has been a problem for Minnesota, and you're starting to see some guys on USC really turn it up as pass rushers, whether it's Nate Clifton on the inside, whether it's a guy like Anthony Lucas or Jamil Muhammad or Braylon Shelby on the edge. If Minnesota is in those third and long situations, Max Brosmer winning this football game through the air has been tough. Last stat I'm going to throw at you, Dill. USC will give up some completions. 65% completion percentage given up. That's 102nd in the country. The difference between USC this year and what it was in 2023, only 6 yards per pass attempt. That's 25th in the country. They're tackling. They're not allowing you to get up the field after the catch. That's something Minnesota wants to do, because, again, they don't push the ball down the field. They want to get it out quick and let their playmakers make plays in space. If USC's defense continues to tackle in space in the secondary, I think it could be tough sledding for Minnesota moving the football here.
And that is like the concern, is I feel like Minnesota's avenue to moving the ball is pretty narrow. Like, it probably starts with getting no less than like 3 yards on your first down run, if you will, or your first down play, and then starting to get yourself into a bit of a rhythm where you don't need to push the ball. You don't need to hold it too long, because obviously the pass pro I just don't see holding up, hasn't held up all year. That to me is like the biggest, I think, issue Minnesota's facing in general is Max Brosmer actually can do what you ask him to do, but it's just kind of a limited skill set.
You have to stay in situations where you ask him to do what you want to ask him to do.
And he really hasn't shown a great ability to make plays beyond that. And I think when you're a quarterback for that type of offense and you can't really go beyond the offense, it's really, really hard to be consistent in terms of moving the football all that often.
Let's flip over to this USC offense. Against the Minnesota defense, that's really, really good. Like, it's just disciplined. I think you take a look at the numbers. I mean, 19.3 points per game allowed, 27th in the country, only 4 yards per play allowed. That's 8th in the country. Really good in the secondary, only allowing 4.5 yards per pass attempt. That's number 2 in the country. USC wants to be explosive in the passing attack. That is something to certainly monitor. Dill, the biggest question for me, I got 2 questions for USC on offense. And if they can figure out these 2 questions, I feel quite confident with USC in this football game. One, can you come out with better game script in the first half? This is back-to-back weeks, or back-to-back games, I should say. And it's rare to say this, where Lincoln Riley just doesn't have a great game plan to start a game. And if you're USC, there's only so many games you can get away with starting off really slow and then coming back and winning football games. Lincoln Riley is one of the best in the business at calling plays, if not the best. Can he have a better first half script against Minnesota? And then secondly, what are you doing in pass protection? You clearly have some problems up front, whether it's Elijah Page at left tackle, whether it's Alani Noah at right guard. Is there something you can do to alleviate some of the pass rush? And I don't think Minnesota has an elite pass rush, but they have some guys to get after you. What can Lincoln Riley do to help out this offensive line in pass protection situations?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it starts with just being balanced. I mean, I know we've been calling for that, but when they're running the ball pretty well, they've been able to keep themselves on schedule. They're not getting hurt too bad in the pass rush. it just feels like sometimes they've gone away from it. Now, frankly, part of it is their special teams needs to stop shooting themselves in the foot early in
Agreed.
these football games because they haven't been able to cover punts. They've been getting stuck in the like
Yeah, they're
5 yard
starting
line.
to drives like inside their own 5 half the time.
Like, and if you do that, it doesn't matter how good your offensive coordinator is or your play caller. There's no way to call yourself out of those situations at the rate they're getting stuck there.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think special teams, they just need to come out and play better ball at the end of the day. And then I think it's just about like not giving up on the run so quickly. And I get it. It's tough because you have really, really good wideouts who have started to really impact this game. I mean,
Yes.
Deuce Robinson, led by especially Jacoby Lane, have really started to become a handful, if you will, on the edge. But they're running the ball really, really well when they do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, and why balance? We saw had someone ask that question. If you are throwing the foot, I mean, and USC throws the football line, I don't blame them for throwing the football, right? They're only run the football 38% of the time. That's 125th in the country. They're throwing the football top 10, 60+% of the time. That's top 10 in the country. When you have some semblance of a run game, it makes the defensive line have to respect what you're doing running the football. And they're not just pinning the ears back and getting after the passer. When they've decided to run the football, it's 5 yards per carry. That's 35th in the country. It's been a solid rushing attack that they just haven't gone to that often. And I think it would be smart because I look at this offensive line and say they're better running the football than they are in pass protection right now. So one, it helps you find that balance. But number two, it could help you build some confidence on the offensive line as well. I think another thing to watch here, I got two kind of keys here. One, USC continuing to figure out who the difference makers are. Like I think they figured it out. Now we thought it was pretty obvious to start the season. I think it took them a little bit. Jacoby Lane is your guy. Like he's the guy when you're in a rut, which USC was in. Throw the football up to him and let him go make some plays. Minnesota's got some injuries in the back end. Justin Wally, who I think is their best cornerback, didn't play for Michigan. Not sure what he's going to be in terms of this football game. But if he's not on the football field, you're going to have some matchups that you like down the field with Jacoby Lane and Deuce Robinson. Secondly, I would like to see USC get more to the perimeter in this football game because you look at Minnesota, they can box you in a phone booth. Like that's how PJ Fleck has built this roster for the last 5+ years, right? We want to be really physical along the lines of scrimmage. We want to keep this game kind of in a phone booth and just be the more physical team. If you're USC, you feel confident that you can win a physical football game, but you also want to play to your strengths. And that is the team speed that you have on offense. Zachariah Branch, maybe not the most polished wide receiver just yet, but he's still an electric factory when he has the football in his hands. Can you continue to find ways to get your playmakers out in space? If you can do that, like that favors USC in this football game in a big way.
And especially with not a wildly athletic front seven, or especially at the linebacker spot for Minnesota. I mean, those guys are really more in-box thumping linebackers. They're not the creme de la creme in space.
And they're damn good at being thumpers too.
They're really good. But again, that's like USC certainly has the ability. They have the weapons. Obviously, Zachariah Branch, and then even their running backs, I think, have been really good out of the backfield making plays. So I think there is a way for USC to get this game going horizontally a little bit, get those linebackers in spots they don't want to be. And then, again, just getting the ball out a little bit more on time quickly, like having some easy stuff to avoid having your pass rush really be able to pin its ears back. Because I think you might be underselling Minnesota's defensive ends. I think Joyner and Strigow can really get after team. I thought they did a really good job disrupting Michigan's passing attack for what that's worth. Obviously, not much of one.
Ain't that easy, brother? I think this is going to be kind of a clash of styles, but again, USC's proven to be like kind of like a Big Ten team. Like I think they've been a lot more physical. Also, that one last thing I have in my notes, like moving the pocket. Like that's something, and Miller Moss has done. He's not a freak show athlete, but he can make it happen, and he can extend plays, and he can throw off platform. Move in the pocket takes a little bit of pressure off your offensive line as well. That's another thing I had in my notes. All right, Dill, let's get to the pick. 9.5 points. I'll start. I like USC in this football game. I think USC is starting to find itself as a program and identity. I think this is the most confident I've seen Lincoln Riley at USC, even going back to the 2022 season where Caleb Williams and USC were a college football playoff contender and Caleb Williams won the Heisman. This is the most comfortable Lincoln Riley's been as a head coach at USC, at least in my opinion, in terms of how he's dealing with the media, how he's dealing with some of the off-field stuff that we see going on. So I think that's where it starts. And then I think secondly, I just don't think this is the Minnesota team that I'm comfortable taking in games like this. I don't know if they have an identity on offense. I don't think Max Brosmer is a guy that you can lean on as much as they want to lean or have to lean on him. I don't think they want to lean on him like this, but I think they have to lean on him because they can't get the run game going. So for that reason, give me USC going on the road, covering the 9.5 points. I can't see USC coming out slow again in this football game. So I'm going to go USC 9.5 here.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do, just frankly, for me with Minnesota's offense. I think they're just not designed to do what they want to do. Brosmer is like a guy who, again, I think could be a good complementary piece if they could run the ball. But the fact that they can't really do that, and it hasn't, I mean, we've seen them play teams they should be able to run against, and they're not. I don't think they can be that one-dimensional against the secondary because I actually think they can just like kind of go man-to-man across the board. And who's going to go
put Max Brosmer on a Minnesota team like in 2022 or 2023? Like, I kind of like this team.
He could give you like a Tyler Johnson or no, I'm not. That's the wide receiver, but whoever that quarterback was, Taylor Morgan. Or something.
Morgan. It was something Morgan. I wish I could help you out with that. Didn't have the name on my head.
But he could be a good quarterback in that situation. Again, his lack of athleticism, his lack of playmaking ability, and their lack of ability to kind of stay on schedule in these games, especially against better competition. That's very concerning, I'd say.
So the boys are both on USC. We'll close it out there again. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.